Hey, yo, climbing the labyrinth. This is an episode that many have been asking for, and one that I'm really excited about. This is kind of two parts of kind of some Q&A stuff. Today is kind of fun. I have Kristi Palsma, the interim director at Inspiration Hills, and we're going to do some Q&A stuff just over where is Inspiration Hills at in all of this RCA, ARC, denominational things going on. Where is camp in the midst of all this? Because two of the big things that get asked at a lot of congregational meetings, or at least things that happen in my congregation, were the question of okay, so we make our vote, but what happens to camp if we're not RCA anymore? Is the camp going to stay RCA? What do we? Are we still connected to them? How does all this stuff work? And I basically said, well, I can't answer that question because the camp has to answer the question itself. And then the second one is, what about Northwestern? What about our colleges? And so I'm in the works of trying to get something set up to work with one of the board members from Northwestern to have a conversation about what's going on there. But today is a conversation with Kristi and Inspiration Hills. So make sure that you stick around to the end, and we'll give you all the contact info and stuff if you have further questions for her. But let's turn to Kristi. Well, thank you, Kristi. Kristi is here. She is the interim director for Inspiration Hills, and everybody has lots of questions. But before we get to questions, give us an update on how camp was this summer, maybe some plans for the future, and really anything that you think people should hear before we get into the nuts and bolts of stuff.
No, sounds great. It's been a really exciting season at Inspiration Hills. Just got done with camp. So staff is like taking a breather. Some of us have been able to take some vacation time and honestly reflect on the faithfulness and the goodness of what God has done in the past couple months. So a lot of people have heard about us getting back into the swing of summer camp. This past summer, we hosted over 1,000 campers. The exact number is 1,078 kids and adults came to Inspiration Hills. And that's a lot. That's a lot. But it was a lot of fun. Our program director, Paige Luthold, had about 26 summer staff that she hired from local colleges, but we also had students that came all the way from Maine and New York that worked here at Inspiration Hills this summer. Yeah, pretty long drive.
That's a long ways to come for camp. And I say that because I was a kid that didn't grow up in the church, and so I didn't get to go to church camp or camp anything. Camp was going to Grandpa and Grandma's house in the summertime. To come that far, that means that you have a legacy that people have heard where they're like, oh no, we're going to camp.
Yeah, well, even for someone to come work in between their college years to be in Inspiration Hills, we kind of joke around with them being like, you came to Iowa? And a lot of people have been to the Field of Dreams this past summer. I don't know if anybody's watched that movie, but there's a quote in that movie that says, "Is this heaven?" And we can say it's Iowa. So
it's Iowa. Well, especially after the most recent baseball game thing that they did. I'm sure some people know, or at least people that are, I don't know, maybe born before the year 2000 might have a slight possibility of knowing things. But more and more, I find myself with movie quotes where you go, "You've never seen that movie?" And people are like, nope.
Yep. So, but yeah, we had those staff come out from different areas, and our theme this summer was "Be renewed by the spirit of your mind," coming from Ephesians 4:23, and it was a lot of fun, not only for campers, but even for staff to start reflecting on being renewed by the Word of God and allowing His Spirit to provide that renewal. So often we go to other things to get renewed or find that refreshment. Even for what I started out with, like staff's finally taking some time off, vacation, and feeling that renewal physically. But for us to actually dive into Scripture and find that spiritual renewal has been refreshing for the staff to dive into, but for the campers. And one of the campers expressed to one of the college students, like, "This is the closest I've ever felt to God." And that was for them to really dive into their Bible studies of what is truth, who is God, and to find scripture very revealing and very refreshing and renewing. So we had a lot of fun, a lot of great questions. And our hope and prayer is that a lot of that was brought home and brought to the communities, that what was taught here through having TOG time, which stands for time alone with God, having Bible studies, having time to worship the Lord, that those rhythms, that those exercises were brought to the homes and communities, that people don't just wait for camp to happen, but that they really are equipped to continue walking in their relationship with the Lord outside of this place. So that was some of the bigger news. Has been the debt elimination. That has been such a blessing. This past summer, we were able to retire over $600,000 worth of debt. And Dave Heilman, our advancement coordinator, started a campaign at the beginning of this year that was a 3-year campaign to eliminate camp's debt. And in May, we had a generous donor step up that said, you know what, I'm going to match up to $300,000. And that match allowed us to eliminate the debt. And for, I think it was the end of May, I can't remember the exact date, but end of May, we started promoting that. And for 40 short days, over 270 people donated to the debt elimination. And we were able to announce already at the end of June that we were complete. We were done. All the funds are in. And we were thinking it was going to take till the end of summer camp. But at the end of June, God blessed us immensely by the support of churches, individuals, families, businesses that came alongside of us. So that has been pretty exciting for Inspiration Hills. But I have to say thank you to everybody who was a part of that, and continue to pray and support us in that, that we kind of run forward with a perspective of being stewardly, that we run forward with a perspective of keeping ministry at the forefront, because camp is here for a purpose and for a reason, and that is also to be a place for churches to use us in a way that they can have retreats, they can send their kids to camp, but outside of that, even more for the communities to reach out and to use this facility too.
Do you want me to put, is his name Dave, his number at the bottom of the screen? So then like you can say, hey, look, he's got a resume that is par excellence after a few short months and 600,000 gone. That's a serious story.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So we've been very blessed.
I know that even from my standpoint, I got 4 little ones, and 3 of them are big enough to go to camp, and they all love it. It's always like, when can we go back? So
that's good. That's good to hear. So, I mean, even the staff here were like, oh, when is summer coming? Like, we're just very excited for camp to come again. But we are in that retreat season, and we're really pumped for, we have a 5K coming up on September 18th. It's a obstacle 5K. And it doesn't matter if you're like super in shape or mediocre or you haven't ran in a while. You can walk this, but there's over 12 obstacles, and you can bring your kids out, because there's a 1 mile up top where you can watch your kids do all the obstacles, and then Pastor Ken, you can run it too.
Well, I am a avid working out sort of person, but I don't do a whole lot of cardio. And so every morning at 5, I go to the gym, but that doesn't include a whole lot of time on the treadmill. Although my kids would love to laugh at me while I did that. When's the date for that while people are watching?
September 18th for that one. And then other upcoming events is we do have an auction on October 22nd, and that is raising funds for our kitchen. We are putting a new fire suppression system in there. Ours is not up to code and needing a nice refresh. So we are raising funds for that. And we're also looking for sponsors as well as items for that auction. So if anybody feels moved to give that way, we're still piecing that together for October 22nd. So
awesome. And I think one thing that, as somebody in the world of churches and raising funds and all of that, that if people are watching this and they're not savvy, like they go, well, you just raised $600,000. Well, that was just to get you even. There are still
Mm-hmm.
continued projects and always things going on that always need support and help and all of those things. So for anybody that's watching going, well, what happened to all that other money? That all that other money was already spent and gone. That was to get them up to being able to function without that looming over their heads. Is that, if I'm saying that correctly for y'all too?
Yep. So, no, we are, we have a lot of excitement to move forward and being able to use funds in the future directly to ministry. There's been the past of putting money towards debt, and now that that's complete, future years, we won't be looking at that. So right now, a lot of fundraising is to support what we have going on right now in the midst. And one of that, like I mentioned, the auction going to the events we have going on and supporting the facility, because we're nearing 50 years, so we're getting a little old. So our buildings need a little remodel as well and refresh.
When is 50 years?
In 2023.
TikTok. Do you have multiple planning committees like every other church that has some sort of big anniversary come? You got to have like 20 different people from different things trying to figure out what to do.
Oh, yeah. We're in the works of trying to piece together some of the historical facts and different things. And it's been actually a lot of fun uncovering the history of Inspiration Hills. And there's a lot of people out there that remember this being a farm and a cattle pasture area back 50 years ago. And it's fun for them to stop by and talk with us about that because it's good to be reminded of where we've been and what God has done in 50 years. So it's just a really neat reflection. And some of that history, or I shouldn't say some, a lot of that history is tied to the RCA. And that's one of the topics you wanted to bring up of, what does that look like in the future? But I think one thing I just want to touch on with the historical fact is Inspiration Hills back in 71 started from a desire of wanting to have a youth retreat place. And that stemmed from the East Sioux classes, and it grew into the West Sioux, Dakota, Minnesota classes in the RCA. And that's where everything just started rolling. Things started happening, and the property here was purchased. And in 73, the board of directors was formed through the different classes representation in that. And in 75 was our first retreat that was hosted here on property. So we have come a long ways from a farm out by Fairview, South Dakota, and Inwood, Iowa. And that history is tied to the RCA of where that desire has come. And one of the things that, looking at old articles of that we had back then, is their big thing was we wanted to work into having a place that was pursuing guests and campers to know Christ and making him known. And it's very neat for me to look at the purpose and the drive back in 1971 and 73 and know that has centered us on our mission statement to provide an environment for individuals to come to know and grow in Christ and be challenged for life in God's kingdom. And that is something that is so neat to see that purpose and that mission still being focused on, because so often when organizations reach that 50-year mark, people can kind of start to see that mission drift, or people getting a little off of what they were here to be for. And I can say with just the encouragement and the knowledge of what I see is Inspiration Hills being able to really hone in on that and encourage people to pray for that as we continue to move forward, that we don't create a space that is counter to what God has called us to do. So,
yeah, I think that's good to point out that for almost 50 years now, that you and those that have come before you and all of the people that dreamed of making it happen the years before it started in the 70s, we're saying, hey, we need a place for our kids and for us to get away. And I know that I've been a part of a couple of retreats that have been out there that aren't like youth related stuff, that big people can go to camp too. And it's actually, especially the new lodging facilities and stuff, is pretty nice. It's not campish. Mm-hmm. It's way bigger and nicer than glamping even. So, you touched on it there, that in the early 70s, then between East Sioux, West Sioux, and then spreading into Dakota and Minnesota, that those classes said, hey, let's come together and start a camp, or what's the connection between those now? There's still a connection to all of those?
Yep. So the Classes support Inspiration Hills. Inspiration Hills reports to the Classes meetings, being able to say what's been going on and what ministry has been happening. But our board is also reflective of that as well. We have board representation from those different Classes, and moving forward, the board is looking at, okay, what's happening to the Classes. I know there's been concerns of the different things going on within the RCA and the Classes changing. And one thing I want to point out is Inspiration Hills and the staff, including myself, we've been kind of wondering what is going on. And in turn, I mean, you coming and approaching me to talk today, well, it's exciting. Sorry, I think I cut out a little bit.
Yeah, you cut out for like 15 seconds or so.
Oh, okay. Well, I was just saying that there's a concern for Inspiration Hills from the supporting churches and the Classes, and there's also a concern from us of knowing what's going on. And I have to say that we're pretty humbled from the expression from each side of knowing, hey, we want to care for each other well, and we just thank you guys for that. And please know that whatever may kind of come to a fruition, that Inspiration Hills is its own entity. It is a ministry that moving forward, whatever may happen, we just encourage your support. And it may look different in the future, whether it's Classes, whether it's individual churches. There is an excitement for us moving forward in different ministry avenues, and knowing that it may look a little different of how churches support us. We're going to kind of change with what's going on as well if we need to.
Yeah, I think it's one of those where we're kind of in that time where a lot of people don't really know what's going on, and they kind of hear whispers and stuff. And so from a Dakota Classes standpoint, we are 30 some churches, and close to that have filed their letters of petition to withdraw from the RCA. And I think it's 24 or 25 have already had their congregational meetings and have voted. And for everybody that wonders, how that really works out, well, I think we have just over 95% in favor of moving towards something new. That towards something new is each congregation's choice. But for many, it's going to be the Alliance of Reformed Churches, which has a lot of historical base of kind of some localized leaders from here and some familiar faces that some people from the Midwest would know, and people that have been around the RCA for years and years. But the thing that even I've noticed from our congregation and then other people that I talk to is most churches kind of get the feel for where they're going to go. But the number one thing they ask, the two things. Number one is, well, what's going to happen to camp? And then the second one is, what's going to happen to the colleges? What happens to Northwestern? And so I reached out to have the intentional conversation, because what I've always said is, well, I can't tell you what's going to happen to them because they have to make their own decisions on things. And part of that is, honestly, I've never been on the board or a part of Inspiration Hill, so I don't know what you guys have to do, can do, how far you are accountable to certain things within the RCA. So maybe what are the conversations that y'all are having just as a board, and in as much detail that you can actually share? I understand how people watching go, well, we want more details. Well, sometimes they're just not worked out yet. And so what is coming in the future, or what sort of things are you guys throwing around to help those folks that sit in the pews and go, well, we're choosing to move forward with a different denomination, but what is happening at Inspiration Hills?
No, those are great things to ask and inquire about. For Inspiration Hills, the board is having the discussion and kind of processing what is it going to look like in the future. Like I said, our board is represented from the Classes, and that governance is maybe something that right now is in the discussion. Is that going to change? What's going to happen in that area? But concern-wise of what's happening to us as an entity or ministry, we're still holding on to, like I mentioned, our mission statement, our statement of faith, how we are doing ministry. None of that is going to change entirely at all. Honestly, it's just going to look a little bit different of some of the decisions we make within the board. But I don't know if that answers your question directly or helpful in that area, but I don't think it's something that we need to worry about, but it's something that is a good question to ask.
Yeah. I think you answered a lot of that in there, because if your board is a part of a bunch of classes that don't necessarily have like Dakota's, I guess at this point it's a possibility that there could be a few churches that remain RCA within Dakota classis, but then I would assume that the regional synod would reallocate them to a different classis because there wouldn't be enough churches to have things move forward. So then what do you do if you need to have a board member from a certain classis and that classis doesn't actually exist anymore? So that would be a struggle. I can totally see how that comes true.
Yeah. So those things are getting pieced together and figured out as those decisions are being made within the classes.
Maybe one thing is in talking with other groups where they are like a church is specifically tied to a classis and a denomination that they are accountable to. What is there some sort of jargon or something that I know when I talk with some of the college people that there is an affiliation with the RCA and they are not necessarily kind of bound to it? Is there something that y'all kind of work under as far as you are connected to the RCA or you are an RCA camp, or what is kind of the flow there?
Yeah, I guess the way that our articles of incorporation and our bylaws state is that we're governed by the RCA classes of the Dakota, Minnesota, ESU, and WESU classes. That we are governed by them. We are our own entity. We are able to work under a statement of faith that is developed through the board of directors that oversees us. So kind of our structure is we have 9 members of the board, and that board oversees my position, and then my position is able to oversee the full-time staff. And that's kind of our flow of leadership and being able to be held accountable in those areas from the board membership being connected to those classes. So like I said, those things might are being reviewed at this time due to the nature of what's going on in the classes.
Which is basically just like a localized church where, though I'm the pastor at First Reformed Church, I don't get to do anything I want. There's still a elders and deacons and a consistory that meets that we're a part of. And so same kind of structure for you and for the camp in general. Would you, and here's where I don't know if the question is actually the appropriate question, but the one that the majority of people just point out say is, so is the camp going to stay RCA? And I don't know if that's even the appropriate way to ask something like that, because you being a part of 4 different classes that to some degree, you may not have a whole lot of control over what that means, or maybe you do. I don't know. So good luck with that one.
Yeah. No, that's an interesting question and it's valid. It's hard to say like, okay, Inspiration Hills was supported and started through the RCA denomination. We are overseen by our board that is represented, and we have a statement of faith that we are deriving our direction from as well, which is saturated in God's word and something that the board of directors put together. So, yeah, no, we're very tied to the Reformed doctrine and the strong desire of wanting to make Christ known. So kind of answering your question, kind of not, kind of hard to tell what's going to be pieced together in the next couple months or so.
Yeah. And I think one thing, if people are listening, that when you have different groups that help kind of comprise what your board is, then you don't have necessarily a whole lot of say in that unless the board chooses to make some say in that. And how that is put together is changing. So for you guys, give me the short answer that somebody watching when they go, So you are RCA or you not? Is a good answer like yes, and we will give you more info as it becomes available or something like that?
I would say yes, we're governed by the RCA classes, but we are our own entity and ministry here in Northwest Iowa.
Okay. And then, so that answers the basic question to whatever degree people are satisfied, that is totally on them. The greater question is, so for the churches that are stepping back from the RCA and going in a different direction, or even the ones that are remaining in the RCA, but not really sure what that means for them as far as connections to places, how can churches continue to stay connected? So like First chose to step back from the RCA and is looking towards the Alliance of Reformed Churches. What does that mean for us as a congregation, just maybe as a just little picture into all the other congregations that go, how do we still stay connected to camp? Like, does anything really change for us, or is it all the same?
I mean, there's pieces of it that you can definitely evaluate and change. I know different churches look at this a little bit differently, but for a church to evaluate, okay, is this a ministry we want to support and add to our budget? Something that we want to continue to uphold, is something that we want to be connected to, that we want to send our kids to. A really neat and creative way that a lot of churches support Inspiration Hills is that they encourage their kids to come to camp, and that they will help support half of the funds to get them to Inspiration Hills. And I really even encourage churches to consider seeing that as an outreach opportunity to invite their kids and their church to invite someone from their community and do just that. Inspiration Hills, we want to equip our kids that are in the church, but also allow them to share the gospel with those at their school and their community. And camp can be a place just for that. So don't want to limit to just the church folk. Please consider what that may look like for an outreach opportunity. Another way is, like I mentioned, about the funds side of things, of donating and supporting your kids coming here, but also enjoy the facilities. Come on out, book a retreat here, use our ropes course, use the amenities and things that God has provided us here to encourage and support your congregations. And maybe it's just being able to take a pastor's retreat out here. If you want to use one of our cabins and take a step away and evaluate, okay, where's the church going? What are some sermons, planning, things that I need to do? We want to create that space for the churches to utilize us in many years to come, to provide that place for brainstorming, refreshment, renewal. So there's kind of two avenues churches can look at. Like I said, the funds, and also using the facilities for their congregation.
So a good answer to that is, to whatever degree people and churches want to stay affiliated. And I think what may be underneath there is, how will things shift? So if a number of Dakota Classes churches leave and suddenly you are de facto not exactly governed by a Dakota Classes part of your board anymore, so then do you lose those funds? And how can we help put those back in for those that are moving away? Is that will Inspiration Hills accept things? I would assume they would, but just on the record, from I don't think the Alliance is going to call them classes. I think it's going to be like a network, the Dakota Classes network, what used to be Dakota Class, now a Dakota network in the ARC. If that chooses to be a line item within their budget, that is an affiliation that's totally okay too.
Yep.
I like that simple answer.
I like to ramble, so I have to give you some short answers every once in a while.
No, and I think it points to the reality that sometimes, especially people that have grown up, I have to remind myself, not growing up RCA and not growing up within the church or a denomination per se, that I don't carry the historical connection that many families do, where like, I don't have a connection to whoever's ground that was 50 years ago, like whoever owned it, but somebody does. And they're asking the question. And there's people here in this congregation that are like, I sent my kids there, and my kids sent their kids there, and we want to see something else happen. And the reality is I think you put it simply, is sometimes the anxiety increases the question's sort of tension, and the answer is very simple of simply continue to support. So if churches are not giving as much in dollars towards a denomination per se, then giving more intentional dollars towards Inspiration Hills or towards specific missionaries is still completely okay.
Yep.
Any questions that you hoped we would have covered, or things that you wanted to say or reassure people of, or just a few minutes of simply ramble on whatever you feel like talking about?
Well, in addition to like the RCA question of the direction of Inspiration Hills, another question that's been brought up a lot is, okay, camp just got out of debt. How is camp going to continue to live within their means, to live stewardly, and to work forward in that? So it's a valid question, because if we keep doing the same thing all the time, it's a pretty good chance that we'll go back into that. So that is something else within the board and for myself to review. And those changes are being made. There are different financial reports that we're reviewing so that we can catch things before they just pop up. And for us to be in a manner of raising funds for the different projects we have, and raising that to the extent that we need, and then conducting that project. But a lot of that, we just encourage the support of churches. If you have a work group that wants to help us, like we have to finish residing the main lodge, and some painting needs to be done on the buildings. If churches want to come alongside of us and help us with that, that would be awesome, to help us raise those funds to finish these buildings. Because yes, on the exterior, is it important for ministry? Yes, because we want people to be able to sit on the back deck, enjoy devotions, and not be distracted by chipped paint or a building that isn't taken care of. So we want to do those items in the next year or so to enhance what we have here, so we can continue to provide ministry opportunities. So the long answer is those questions for keeping us out of debt are being asked, and different things are being implemented, and basically checkpoints that we don't go back into that. The other item is continue to find the support and relationship with churches that want to be a part of this. And those relationships are important to us, because many churches like First Reform out of Sioux Falls have been really supportive and donated to camp, have been a part of the ministry here. I'm going to pick on Tanner Manns, because he was a summer staffer actually with me. So if you want a good story about Tanner Manns and his wife, I might have a few.
He's down the hall, actually.
But yeah, it's just been really neat to see those connections in the past. And now I'm kind of going off on a tangent, but I just want to give people a little comfort that we're working through those things and making necessary changes to move forward in ministry and not get back into a place that we've been.
Yeah. And I'll just I'll triple stamp your double stamp there of, if I was a person that was bringing my son or daughter to Inspiration Hills for the first time, because maybe they never went to camp, or maybe our whole family had a conversion experience and the church said, hey, camp is a really good thing for your elementary, middle school, high school, whatever, and you pull up and it kind of looks crappy, then you're going to second guess. I mean, it's just like if I was taking my daughter to somebody's house and you pull up and you go, ooh, it doesn't look so good around here, then you're going to have that reality of that's practical for everybody else in the world too. So as a good, I think a good mission reality, a lot of times churches take care of their own buildings. Taking care of the things around really does show to the people that come, hey, we care for everything. And I think it's a good biblical mandate when the Psalms speak of the oceans cry out and all of the things long, especially in Romans, like that the creation longs for God's restoration, and that we're supposed to be a part of that restoration. And that means taking care of the things that God's given you. So how maybe real quick, I don't want to open a can of worms for you, but is there a way that people can get a hold of you if they have more questions, or at least nothing super crazy, or even just website stuff, things that they can hear more info as Inspiration Hills moves through this process? What are those?
Yeah, so feel free to follow us on Facebook and check out our website. My email is director@inspirationhills.org. So I'd love front with what's going on in Inspiration Hills. Did I cut out there a little bit?
10 seconds, but it got your email. Maybe give your email address one more time.
Okay. My email is director@inspirationhills.org. So I very much welcome questions or concerns that are brought up, and want to hear from people. And even if you have stories about Inspiration Hills when it started, I love hearing that stuff too. So feel free to follow us on Facebook, check out our website, email. You can call the office as well. Please know if I don't get back to you right away, we will get to you. I will actually be gone for the next couple weeks. I have some military training. So I serve in the Army Reserves. So if it's not me directly, don't be offended. I'll get to it in a few weeks. But
you get the same thing that we get in the church world, where if it's not the pastor that calls you back, then is something wrong. And the reality is everybody has busy lives. And I did not know this about you when we first started kind of conversing about this, that you're in the reserves. And so for those of you out there living in the world of the craziness going on, I just want to say to you, thank you for choosing that path to say, there are some things that I'm willing to kind of stand up for and to serve at camp. I mean, it's kind of both a crazy commitment in life, but thank you for your service. And I know that many, many, many others within the area would say the same thing to you too, now knowing, or maybe they knew already, but that was something new that I learned.
yeah, it's a very interesting thing. You talk about camp, and then, oh yeah, by the way, on the side,
I'm in the Army Reserves. You're what?
So no, it's been a joy to serve here at Inspiration Hills and to serve our country. We have a wonderful gift of being able to live in a country that we're able to share our faith. And it is time for us to continue to uphold that, to share that. And that's something that Inspiration Hills wants to assist churches with and individuals that come here to share the gospel. We have the time now, and I just have a joy of seeing that in both spheres of my life there.
Awesome. Any last words from you?
I think that's it. Unless you have any other questions that you may have.
Nope. I wanted to keep it short and sweet because I tend to ramble for a very, very long amounts of time when I do these things. And so if we're both ramblers, then it turns into a whole bunch of people going, okay, get back to the question. But for people wondering, make sure that you go to Facebook, or you can email Kristi directly. You can find all of that stuff on their website. Give me the website one more time.
Inspirationhills.org.
Very simple. So, Kristi, thank you for taking the time to do this. Thank you to you and the board for working through all the things. I think the one thing that is good for people to hear is camp isn't going anywhere. That regardless of what label is on the outside or inside or bylaws packet somewhere tucked away in a cabinet drawer, camp is still camp. Y'all are still going to do what you're going to do. And I will be the first to say that my kids will always be going back. So
sounds great. Well, we look forward to seeing them here. So
thank you, Kristi. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for making time for this and asking those questions. I mean, it's something that's hard to discuss some of this. But I know that through this all, God is going to see us through. He has a purpose for his church and purpose for his para-ministries like Inspiration Hills. And regardless of how many times we mess it up, his will prevail.
So if y'all didn't catch that, Kristi's awesome. She handled all those things like a champ. That there's a lot of questions in there that some of them just don't have answers as of yet, and some things will be worked out. But the big thing to keep in mind is if you've made it this far and you are committed to being committed to camp, you can find ways of doing that. And if you're in a congregation that's looking at moving away from the RCA, that congregation can always stay connected to camp. Or if you're in a congregation that's already moved away from the RCA or towards something else, then if it's going to be when the ARC, when we moved into something like that, then I would assume that there will be a connection to camp with that, where some ARC funds go that direction, or it might just stay all local within each church. Some of those details have to be figured. But if you need to, you can contact Kristi at, I believe she said it was director@inspirationhills.org, or just go to their website, inspirationhills.org, and you can get all the info as far as contact info for people and things. Facebook is a good one for them too. If you send me things and I don't know the answer, I will send them to her, or if you post comments or whatever, then we will get those towards the camp. Yeah, so stay tuned. Northwestern is on the docket next, within the next couple of weeks, with Labor Day holiday and some other things going on. But yeah, we've climbed the labyrinth just a little bit further. Thanks, y'all.